most epic moments in the whole MCU so far has been when Captain America wielded Thor's Mjolnir during the climactic battle in Avengers Endgame. While Steve Rogers was worthy of carrying Thor's hammer, the world of Marvel Comics have featured numerous characters who should have never been allowed to lift the powerful weapon. From continuity problems to plain old cheating to hold Mjolnir, let's take a look at all those who got their hands on the hammer but were definitely unworthy. And on the flip side, when you're done with this video, hop on over to our friends at CBR to check out their list of characters who have lifted the hammer and are worthy to use Thor's signature weapon. The Merc with a Mouth is violent, arrogant, and pretty much does whatever he wants. He doesn't exactly fill the criteria for the role of being worthy of wielding Mjolnir in any shape or form. It would have been a big insult to show him on the screen with Thor's hammer, but everything seems pretty fair game in the comics. Take, for example, Deadpool number 37. In the issue, Deadpool spends multiple panels with Loki before the God of Mischief decides to gift him with Mjolnir. Deadpool can summon the hammer, fly with it, and use the powerful strength to take out others. But in typical Deadpool fashion, he has other plans. This includes playing a carnival hammer game and using Mjolnir like a bat at a baseball game. Of course, Loki is also known as the Prince of Lies, and it turns out the Mjolnir Deadpool had was actually a fake. At least he got to cosplay for a while, even donning the traditional Thor outfit. And the twist ending makes sense because we don't see any future in which Deadpool is worthy. Black Widow has been through thick and thin with her fellow Avengers. She was there by Tony Stark's side before the Avengers were even a thing. In Avengers Age of Ultron, she didn't even try to lift Thor's hammer. Probably because she knew that no matter what happened, there was far too much red on her ledger to ever make her worthy. Yet despite her dark history with the Red Room and missions we hope to see in the upcoming Black Widow solo movie, the hero did get to lift Mjolnir in the pages of Marvel Comics probably when she shouldn't have. Granted, the events took place within the pages of Marvel's What If series, but still presented a situation where she held the hammer. In the story, Thor dies and Black Widow visits his grave, quickly realizing that she can easily lift Mjolnir. After relying on her own combat skills for years, it's nice seeing her have some more powers, but out of all of the other Avengers, she would be one of the least likely to be worthy of carrying Thor's torch. Upon holding the hammer, she quickly transformed out of her black leather jumpsuit and into a Thor-inspired outfit, cape and all. Flash forward 40 years later, and we learn what a mighty hero she was. Through the years, Marvel Comics has proven that sometimes it's not about being worthy enough to move Mjolnir. It's more about having the brute force to do so. And considering the massive power of the hammer, it would take a Hulk-sized amount of force. The Incredible Hulk has used his power to make Mjolnir budge, but the massive force of destruction has never truly been deemed worthy to hold the hammer and use it as his own weapon. The only way for him to hold and use it happened when the Hulk took advantage of a huge loophole. In the comic book Avengers Assemble number 4, Hulk found himself under the influence of Thanos and his mind control powers. Before the Avengers could attack Thanos, Hulk turned to Thor, grabbing his hand, holding Mjolnir, and clobbered the God of Thunder with his own hammer. The cover of the issue shows Hulk holding the hammer on his own, but this was not what actually happened in the pages of the comic. It was more of a fantasy-inspired cover, and there have been many dream sequences and fantasies where Hulk has held Mjolnir other times, despite never being deemed worthy. Magneto has the ability to control multiple types of iron using his mutant superpowers, but there has always been exceptions. Thor's Uru crafted Mjolnir. No matter what happened, if Magneto was not deemed worthy, then he would not be able to hold the hammer, superpowers or not. Well, Magneto always gets what he wants, and the rules were completely changed for the Ultimate Universe. The Ultimate Universe did not have to follow the same rules as the traditional Marvel Universe, and thanks to this, several loopholes were used to allow Magneto control of Mjolnir. Turns out, the ultimate version of Thor's hammer was also crafted with some iron, giving Magneto the convenient method of holding the weapon. Controlling the electromagnetic air around the hammer, Magneto was able to hold it when no one else could. Being one of the most unworthy characters to lift the hammer, it's only fitting that Magneto could only physically lift it as opposed to having access to all of the powers. Essentially, Magneto could deliver powerful strikes, but nowhere near the same type of skills and impact Thor has while using the weapon. In the first Thor movie, Odin cast a worthiness enchantment on Mjolnir, and it took a long time for Thor to learn his lesson and earn the worthiness to hold Mjolnir again. With all the high standards to follow, it seems nearly impossible that Loki would ever get to use his brother's hammer.
I was a fool to think you were ready, Father.
We never got to see it in one of the many appearances of Loki in the MCU, but the comics are a whole different story. We all know Loki wouldn't be deemed worthy enough straight up, so just like the way he fooled Deadpool into holding Mjolnir, Loki used some of his own tricks to hold the powerful hammer. In the Earth X series, all of the Asgardians become formless beings. When Loki figures out the powers and abilities associated with being formless, he decides to become his own version of Thor. As part of this creation, Loki gets his own version of Mjolnir and deems himself worthy enough to hold his own weapon. So the Earth X series may be more of a side story than official canon, but Loki did find a way to easily hold and use the hammer his brother has taunted him with for all of his life. In the MCU, there are few characters who have held Mjolnir on the big screen. One of the first to do so besides Thor was Vision. In Age of Ultron, he saw many heroes try to lift the hammer to no avail. The payoff to the scene came later on in the movie when Vision did it with ease. The lifting of Mjolnir wasn't indicating that Vision was worthy, it was more of a loophole. Vision is not a living creature, so the enchantment of the hammer does not apply to him, making it easy to lift and use Mjolnir when needed. While Vision's use of the hammer was a great gag and funny payoff, some key moments in the MCU may have been better without it. For example, imagine if no one had actually used Mjolnir other than Thor up to the events of Endgame. Captain America's shining moment was already epic, but it would have been elevated even further. Vision's use of Mjolnir didn't feel the same in any way when compared to Captain America. Oddly, despite holding Mjolnir in the movie, the Vision in the comics has never held the hammer. There's nothing like a good crossover to mess with the realm of logic and see Mjolnir get used by characters you'd never expected. In this case, we're talking about the one and only Conan the Barbarian. In another what-if Marvel series that basically tosses the hammer around more than workers at Home Depot, Conan the Barbarian and Thor teamed up to take on the evil Thoth-Amon. In the story, Thor gets into some typical trouble, getting sent back in time and stranded in a world filled with barbarians. Thor eventually gets defeated and perishes in the story, leaving the hammer open for the taking. Conan gets his hands on the hammer, and all of the newfound powers allow him to take on Thoth-Amon and succeed. Conan's ultra-violent history and violent lifestyle probably doesn't make him worthy. But as a what-if story, everything is more accepted, noting it is nothing more than some type of professionally published fanfiction. Now, if this was Arnold Schwarzenegger's version of Conan the Barbarian, this would be a whole different story. If you thought the Guardians of the Galaxy were pretty strange with a talking raccoon and a walking tree, well, then you've never read the origin story of Simon Walterson. After the college football player makes a deal with a witch and doesn't pay her, she transforms him into a frog. When a sliver of Mjolnir breaks off, the frog grabs the piece and is instantly transformed into Throg. The character is essentially a frog version of Thor. You know, like if you dressed up your pet frog as the God of Thunder and took it to Comic-Con for a cosplay contest. So technically, Throg didn't hold Mjolnir, but his own smaller version, which has been dubbed Frogmjolnir for those keeping track. Being a heroic frog, there was only one thing Throg could do, and that was join the Pet Avengers. Yep, there's a full-fledged team of superhero pets. Just don't expect to see them on the big screen anytime soon. Oddly enough, there was a separate story where Loki turned the real Thor into a frog and he was still able to hold the hammer. There's nothing like a good Marvel Comics sidekick to help add narrative flow, provide key plot points, and assist our heroes when needed. Over the years, one of the ultimate sidekicks has been Rick Jones. While we've never officially seen him in the MCU, the character has been a major comic book sidekick to heroes like the Hulk, Captain America, and Captain Marvel, among others. Well, don't deny the power of these sidekicks because Rick Jones got to hold the mighty Mjolnir. And yes, time travel and alternate futures were involved. In the comics, Jones gets visited by evil and good versions of himself, with one hailing from the future imperfect reality. It was this good version of Rick Jones who revealed he was worthy of carrying Mjolnir, showing the present-day Rick what he could possibly achieve in the future. So there's two Ricks interacting at the same time, with only one of them being worthy. Man, Odin really had to whisper a lot of things to the hammer to help sort out all these clauses. Why don't we just go ahead and say it? The Man of Steel should now be referred to as the Man of Uru. Yep, in a cash grab looking to feed both the Marvel and DC fanbases, the Justice League and the Avengers had an epic crossover comic book series, and Superman got involved in a way we never thought he would. Superman's massive strength couldn't even lift Mjolnir, but thanks to another loophole, we got to see him wield a hammer, even though he probably doesn't need it to fight. So how did the former Krypton resident get the ability to carry the hammer? Simple, Odin allowed him to. Through another enchantment, Superman got the ability to lift Mjolnir for battle. But as soon as the fight ended, the ability to pick the hammer up was removed. The whole on-off switch on Mjolnir was a little too much, but it was still pretty good to see Supes carrying the hammer, even if his worthiness wasn't true to the weapon's origins. And yeah, Batman was probably a little jealous. We've seen some great female heroes become worthy of holding Mjolnir over the years, including the likes of Jane Foster and X-Men's Storm. One character who cheated her way into holding the hammer without proving her worthiness? Rogue. Time to hop back into the pages of another Marvel What If comic, this time focusing on Rogue's interaction with Thor. Rogue's mutant power is the ability to absorb the powers and energy of others, which certainly comes in handy while placing her hand on the God of Thunder. Once she absorbs Thor's powers, Rogue is able to cheat her way into using Mjolnir, as the foolish hammer must have thought she was still Thor, though with a drastic change in hairstyle. As a part of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants in this comic, Rogue has no heroic intentions with the hammer and kills off several members of the Avengers in the process. Eventually, the power and emotional core of Thor overcomes her, forcing Rogue to do what's right and join up with the good side once again. Even with the change of heart, she still did not prove her worthiness and merely held the hammer thanks to her trickery. It seems like there's an endless amount of loopholes when it comes to holding Mjolnir. We've seen Loki pose as Thor, Rogue steal his powers, and Superman get a special clause built in just for when he's in battle. For the next entry, we present an evil clone of Thor. Nicknamed Ragnarok, the clone was initially created with intentions of being good and in place of Thor's absence. Tony Stark, Ant-Man, and Mr. Fantastic all combined their knowledge to create Ragnarok, but the cyborg hero ended up being anything but heroic. At first, Ragnarok got to use a duplicate Mjolnir, a weapon which featured the same powers and functions without the worry of being worthy. But after Ragnarok got sent into an alternate reality, he was able to become worthy of holding the real Mjolnir, with no explanation given. Oddly enough, carrying Mjolnir in this alternate reality meant that Thor's evil clone would have to be completely bald. Yeah, we can't make this stuff up. In Thor Ragnarok, we saw Thor and Hulk battle in the fighting arena. But when Thor took on Red Hulk in Marvel Comics, the outcome was a whole different story. Not only is Red Hulk unworthy of holding onto Mjolnir, but the way he did it angered fans greatly, and many wish the whole storyline was hammered out of Marvel history. So let's recap it for you and see if you agree. As Thor's hammer goes flying up into the atmosphere, Red Hulk grabs Thor and then clings onto the hammer's handle to go for a ride. Okay, so because Thor was being held by Red Hulk, he could technically go for the same ride. Great. We saw the OG Hulk do this before as well. Now here's where things get a little sketchy. Once Red Hulk and Thor are floating through space, Red Hulk is able to hold Mjolnir all on his own. What's the reasoning? There's no gravity forcing the hammer down. Well, that is a pretty big issue because it was never gravity keeping the hammer from being held. Thor has had plenty of family problems over the years, but there was one point where things got so bad his brother and father decided there needed to be a replacement. Enter Roger Norvell. Basically resembling a red-haired Thor, Roger wasn't an Asgardian or really anyone you would consider a hero. He was simply a cameraman set out to capture footage for a documentary on Asgard. When the documentary plans don't go as intended, Loki takes advantage of Roger and grooms him to be a Thor replacement. After proving himself worthy and getting killed in the process, Odin brings him back to life and actually goes along with Loki's plan. So yeah, an everyday cameraman is deemed worthy to hold Mjolnir, but only because of Loki and Odin's manipulation. After Roger takes the role of Thor, his duties as a hero are not just a one-and-done miniseries. He's featured in many stories, has a rivalry with Thor, and mixes it up with the likes of other heroes like Hulk. At the end of the day, he's just not the same Thor we know and love, though. While the story does seem pretty far-fetched, the big screen version of Thor Roger Norvell could be better than Thor the Dark World. Just saying. It seems like whenever Thor comes in contact with an android, the non-human finds a way to get a hold of Mjolnir and use it against Thor. This is exactly the case for Airwalker. The android fighting machine has a complicated history in the world of Marvel Comics. He began as Nova Corps Captain Gabriel Lynn before his soul was transferred into the body of an android fighting machine dubbed the Airwalker. With the nickname Death Angel, the flame-winged warrior proved to be an ideal opponent for Thor, especially after he got a hold of Mjolnir. There have been a lot of disputes about how Airwalker was able to easily hold the hammer and use it against Thor. Some point to the whole android loophole, while others point to the Nova Corps soul being worthy of holding it. Either way, the actions Airwalker takes in the moment of wielding Mjolnir are definitely not worthy. Not only did Airwalker get to use the weapon, but the cover of him holding a lifeless Thor in one hand and Mjolnir in the other is pretty iconic and makes you want to read the full story inside. Wow. Well, now that you've seen all the characters who were unworthy, head on over to see our friends at CBR as they discuss which heroes were definitely worthy of holding Mjolnir. For now, though, leave us a comment and let us know who was the most unworthy to hold Mjolnir. Did Superman deserve to carry it? Any great ones we missed? Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to Screen Rant for more great content.
हेलो एवरीवन। तो गाइस, आज की वीडियो है सुपर हीरो शोडाउन पर, जो है ब्लैक पैंथर और आयरन मैन के बीच में। अभी तक इनके बीच में फाइट नहीं देखने को